we are. And admit Karen. There we go, and I'll just wait a moment or so, just that if anyone is on the dot, they can join us.
Okay.
Okay, let's open the chat. Right, there we are. I think we'll get started now. Anyone who wants to can watch this on the replay, which is going to be made available in the group. Hi, Karen. Nice to have you here with us live. I'm Samantha Dawkins. For anyone who doesn't know me, I am the founder of Koala VA social media marketing agency, and also the owner of the Social Media Made Simple for Therapists Facebook group. And today we are really lucky. We've got Jamie Fern with us, and she is going to be giving us an introduction to the Hakomi method. She's a practitioner, so I will hand it over to you, Jamie, and you can get started with your presentation.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Samantha. And thank you for suggesting that we do this today. I'm really chuffed to be here. So yeah, I'm Jamie, and I'm going to talk to you all about Hakomi. And this really came out of me advertising some training that's coming up in the next couple of weeks through the group. So yeah, we thought it'd be good to talk about it. Not many people know about Hakomi, so yeah, and maybe just to share a little bit about myself. So I'm a counsellor in private practice, and I use Hakomi as part of my practice, and I also do some teaching work. My plan is to do some slides and sort of move in and out of them, because I wanted there to be an experiential element of what we're doing today. So I'm just going to share my screen and show you what I'm planning to do. So I call this an introduction to Hakomi, meeting our whole selves, which feels like it captures something of the fact that Hakomi is very much about our bodies, our emotions, our minds, and our spirits or souls, if we also have ideas about that too. So it's something of a meeting, a whole experience, not just one specific aspect of it. And what I want to talk about today, if I can get the slides to go along. There we go, is what Hakomi is, to say a bit about it, to talk a bit about my journey with Hakomi. So I've been around Hakomi since about 2012, so it's a little while. I wanted to talk a bit about the training and what's involved. So if people are interested in booking onto the trainings, that they get a sense of what that might lead to or what they might get out of it. And as I mentioned, I also want to include some practices in what we're doing, so that if you get a taste really of what Hakomi is like. And there'll be time at the end for questions. So the first thing I want to do is what I call a practice acknowledgement. So something of a setting the context of where I'm practicing from. So I just really wanted to acknowledge it, and it's kind of like what I've seen and heard of land acknowledgements in Canada and in the US, but really specific to my own practice. So I wanted to acknowledge that I'm from Liverpool, which has a historical relationship with the slave trade. And so for me, there's something of how we as a city have benefited from the exploitation of Black and brown bodies, and it feels important then to acknowledge the privileged position that this puts me in as a white person. And I also wanted to acknowledge some of my lived experience as well. So I've lived experience of neurodivergence and of growing up in poor social class. I'm a cisgender woman with preferred pronouns of she, her, and I identify as mostly heterosexual and sometimes questioning, sometimes bi, and I'm also non-religious. And this all might seem like a lot of information to share at the very start, but it feels like our embodied identities are really important in contributing to the lens through which we see things and how we work, how we practice. So yeah, I think how we practice and the culture, and particularly in our Western culture, where largely we're comparing bodies to the privileged bodies of white, middle-class, cisgendered men who are heterosexual and able-bodied, it feels important in an embodied practice like Hakomi and in general life and in working therapeutically too. And maybe to say a bit about Hakomi as a practice as well in a similar kind of a way. So Hakomi was developed by someone called Ron Kurtz, who was based in the US. And as a practice, it lends itself from different traditions, so both Eastern and Western traditions. There's elements of Taoism and Buddhism in it, as well as influences from bioenergetics, Gestalt, Feldenkrais, and Western neuroscience. And the name Hakomi itself, it comes from a Hopi Native American word, which means how do you stand in relation to these many realms? And originally this was used with the blessing of an elder from the Hopi Nation. And we've been in discussion for a while about that word in particular and our use of it and how we might move forward with that, whether the word is still appropriate for us to be using because we're not from the Hopi Nation ourselves. So yeah, it feels important to lay that ground really and acknowledge some different things. And that for me really represents a lot of what Hakomi is about. It's an acknowledgement and being with what is present in the room, what is actually happening in the present moment, and co-creating that together. So yeah, that's where I wanted to start. And so I'm going to move into a short mindful practice now, before I start to talk about what Hakomi is. And I thought it would be a great way to support people into landing or grounding in this space as we arrive together. So whether you're here now or whether you're watching this on the replay, just an invitation to maybe notice what's in your experience now after I've shared some words, or maybe from what's been happening in your day. And this is very often how we start Hakomi training. Sometimes it's how I might start a session with a client as well. And it feels important to say as well that Hakomi is a very invitational practice. So what I'm going to talk about and do today is to make some offerings, and you're really welcome to take part in a way that feels okay for you, to look after yourself in that. So I'm just going to start really by inviting you to maybe notice your surroundings, the room that you're in. So you might just have a look around and see maybe familiar objects, maybe not so familiar objects if you're not at home or in your usual space. Maybe just noticing the colours or the sounds around you. And maybe just turning your attention more towards yourself and noticing where you're sitting or lying down, and the support beneath your body. Maybe noticing your feet on the ground if they are. And maybe just feeling your breath, maybe just taking a couple of deeper breaths as you sit or lie there. And you might want to, as you turn your attention inwards, you might want to close your eyes or soften your gaze. Again, it's an invitation. And as you turn your attention more towards yourself, you might notice what thoughts are there as you're sitting and taking part in this workshop today. Maybe you see things in words, or maybe you have images there. Just really noticing what's in your thoughts right now. Maybe also noticing any emotions that are there. Maybe from the day that you've had, or maybe things that are coming up for you in the present moment from what's been said already. Again, just really noticing what's there. And then also perhaps noticing what's happening in your body. Maybe noticing any areas of tension. Noticing any ways that your body might soften as you turn your attention to different parts. Maybe again, noticing your breath. Perhaps your attention's drawn to the breath as it enters your nose, the coolness in the breath, or perhaps your attention's drawn to the movement of your belly or your chest as you breathe. But really just taking your time to acknowledge what's there. What's there for you in this moment. And then when you feel like you've really checked in with your own experience, just starting to bring your attention back to the space where we are. You might notice again the sounds in the room where you are, the chair beneath you, where you're sitting, those more external sensations around you. Noticing how is it that you get ready to be with other people, or to listen to someone talking, as I'm going to be doing. What are the things you do to get ready for that? And then when you feel ready, just bringing your attention back to this space between us. And really that kind of practice is really about grounding you in the present moment, about slowing things down. Because what we're trying to do in Hakomi is to really notice our experience. And if things are moving fast, if there's a lot going on, it can be really tricky to notice our experience. So we do a lot of this kind of moving into and out of those slower practices of being able to really turn our attention towards ourselves, and then to perhaps do other things while we're in that slower space. And I'll talk more about that as we share today. So I'm going to share my screen again and talk about what Hakomi is, and maybe a bit about my experience with Hakomi. So Hakomi is a mindfulness-based somatic practice that uses experiments in mindfulness. So from that place of being slower, we're wanting to effectively like drop a pebble into that stiller pool. So as we get mindful, it's like, if you imagine your internal experience like water, and when we're slowing things down, what we're aiming for is to feel that stiller place. Maybe the water doesn't completely go still, but we're looking for that kind of stiller quality. And then we might drop some kind of experience into that, which we would call an experiment, to then notice what happens as a result of that experiment and really study that. So it's a type of supporting someone to study their experience. And the purpose of that is to reduce unnecessary suffering. So what we're aiming for is to start to get to know those unconscious beliefs that drive our behaviors. And so part of the process of Hakomi as a practice is to start to bring to the surface those unconscious beliefs that are driving what we do, those habits, so that we can create more space around them, so that we can create more choice. We sometimes might call Hakomi assisted self-study or mindful relating. And whereas mindfulness, we might practice mindfulness in a group as a meditative practice, it can be quite a solitary activity in that we're very much sort of meditating on our own, even if we're in a group. Whereas when we're using mindfulness in Hakomi, it's much more of a interactive with other people type of practice, because what we really want to notice and what a lot of our habits are based around is our relationships with other people. And whilst this talk is specifically for people in the therapists Facebook group, so social media made simple for therapists, so whilst this is where the talk is being sort of shown, I wouldn't say that Hakomi is just a practice for therapists. I think it can have a lot of uses. It can be a practice that can be really nourishing for people. It can be a way to really practice self-care for yourself, as well as something that can be used alongside therapies to support other people. And certainly my first experiences of Hakomi were when I was practicing in education. So I wasn't a therapist at the time. I didn't actually use it as a therapeutic tool. I used it in education. And similarly, I've seen other people using it in different work contexts. There's one of the people that I trained with who uses it in his decluttering business. So it can have a lot of ways of using it, and is not just for therapists. I would say it's really a practice that's open to anyone who's willing to study their experiences mindfully. Yeah, and it feels for me that fundamentally what we're trying to do in Hakomi is support individuals to live a fuller life. So that's been my experience of training in it, is that I feel like I live more fully, that I'm enjoying life more. And I feel like it's about helping people and helping myself to connect more to my authentic self, and to be able to take in nourishment that's around me, and for other people to take in nourishment for themselves. And where talk and therapies are mostly about working with conscious material, because Hakomi is a somatic practice, working with the body, it's very much about accessing our unconscious and those unconscious habits, as I mentioned, that drive our ways of being in the world. So as a counsellor, that really complements and offers something different for clients as well. So they can talk and work with what's conscious, and I think a lot of therapies do that really well. Whereas with Hakomi, it's offering something else. And I see a lot of overlap with Hakomi and practices like body focusing. So the practice that was developed by Eugene Gendlin, person-centered experiential therapies, I can see some overlaps with that too. And there are, I would say, some general parallels with humanistic approaches, as well as some differences. I often, when I'm advertising Hakomi training, mention Pat Ogden's work, and her work developed from Hakomi as a practice, and focused specifically on working with people with trauma. And it does have that element to it, because we're working with the body. What we're often doing is supporting someone to self-regulate, to co-regulate when they've experienced really difficult things. So maybe to mention some of the ingredients of Hakomi, and I've written some of them on the slide there. So love and presence is something that we might draw parallels with empathy, but I would say there's more to it than empathy on its own. And really, love and presence is about taking in another person, about not looking for what's wrong with the person, but looking for what moves you or inspires you about them. And in that sense, it makes it a really nourishing practice. I notice my energy is in a different place when I'm working with someone in a Hakomi way, because I'm taking in, you know, something inspiring about them, or something that I find nourishing about them. I think that's very different than a lot of therapeutic approaches, where often we are looking for what's wrong. We're looking to help someone who's experiencing a difficulty, and to perhaps diagnose them, or to perhaps make some kind of expert judgment on what's happening for them. And Hakomi is very different to that. It's about really seeing the resources that are there within someone. It's based on some principles, which some of them won't be surprising given what I've already said. So mindfulness is one of those principles. And then some of the other ones are organicity. So kind of like self-actualization, that idea that given the right conditions, people will move towards healing and wholeness. Non-violence, which fits with that idea of everything is invitational. So we're never looking to make someone do anything, or to force anything to happen. We're really looking for what's automatically arising in a situation, and working with that. It's about holism. So that idea of mind, body, emotions and spirit are not separate. They're really interconnected. And also about unity, so that, you know, we're not as individuals disconnected from the rest of the world. There is a connection between us and the land. There's a connection between us and other human beings. So yeah, they're some of the ingredients that we're kind of basing this practice on. And then in terms of the practice itself, what a session might look like is 3 kind of phases, which again probably won't be a surprise to many of you as therapists who practice in some way working with others. So the first phase is preparation, which often involves establishing connection with someone. And really what we're looking for is that love and presence connection. So, you know, that you're looking for what's nourishing in the other. And you might also, as part of that, be tracking their present moment experience. So noticing any shifts in energy, that sort of thing, noticing what's happening maybe in their body, and contacting that. So we call, so in counselling, we might sort of reflect things back. We might sort of echo back in some way what someone has said. Whereas in Hakomi, what we're looking to do is make contact statements where we contact a person's present moment experience, and they're really short statements of what we're seeing and noticing about their experience. And in that way, what we're trying to establish is a really strong alliance with that person, and we're particularly looking to get on board the adaptive unconscious. So we're looking for a way in which the trust is built between the practitioner and the client. And then once that has been established, the next phase will be to set up these small experiments in mindfulness. So often very simple, and they might be physical experiments, they might be verbal experiments. And this is the bit where it feels like creativity is a big part of the Hakomi process. And often something arises as I'm sort of working with someone, an idea or perhaps a theory about maybe some core beliefs. And from that, we would then bring an offer of an experiment. And even in just the offering of an experiment, often there will be a reaction to that. And so what we're looking for is to collect that information as it's arising from the person, and to really work together and co-create something, a way of supporting that person to study their own experience. And then once we've done some of that, and it's maybe led to some insight, or perhaps been an exploration of a particular belief that the person might have, or a particular habit, the last phase would be to then work towards some kind of integration or nourishment. And certainly in the more recent years, what as a community we've felt, and certainly Ron, when he was alive, was pushing towards, was that integration phase, that nourishment should be the longer part of the session. And really for me, there's something about, we're so often trying to do things, trying to get somewhere, that it feels like nourishment often is the neglected part of our experience. We don't get a lot of nourishment, I don't think. So there are some of the things about Hakomi, what it is as a practice. And maybe just to say a bit about my own journey with Hakomi. So I'm going to stop sharing for a bit while I'm talking. I'm just going to change my view as well, because I'm kind of, not seeing anything. So I've been involved in Hakomi since about 2012. And what drew me to it were a lot of synchronicities at the time. So I happened to change jobs, and one of the women that I was working with, she'd been training in Sheffield in Hakomi. And I can remember at the time, or around that time, I was reading a book called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. And it's one of the books that is often talked about in Hakomi. We do quite a few practices based around this idea of sort of taking a blink look at someone else, and what impressions that leaves in us, and how it can be quite an intuitive process, but actually there's a lot of neuroscience underpinning that. So I was really kind of drawn to this idea of working with bodies. So my background is working in science. I did an undergrad in biomedical sciences, and then went on to teach science and biology. So I've always had a real interest in bodies, and my own experience with my own body has been a very kind of Western, disconnected. I think our education system really pushes that, you know, if we can master our mind, then our body is, you know, should follow suit. Mind over matter, that kind of an idea. So I'd grown up in that, and then was working in education. So that kind of way of relating to my body was very ingrained. I also grew up in a very religious context. So that was very much about how the body is like a sinful thing, that listening to our flesh is a carnal thing, that it's bad. And so there was lots of messages as I was growing up that I shouldn't connect to my body. And so finding this practice that was so contrary to that was like, whoa. And I was really drawn to it, really drawn to understanding the neuroscience, because I think there is a lot of neuroscience that underpins this kind of body work. And you might have heard of polyvagal theory. You might have heard of people like Dan Siegel, who talks a lot about the mind, what the mind is, and how it connects to the body. And these are the kind of things that we talk a lot about in Hakomi as sort of neuroscience that underpins what we're actually doing when we're practicing something like Hakomi. So yeah, I finished my training in 2016 and didn't become a certified practitioner until 2018. And at that point, I started assisting with the Hakomi Lancaster training, which is where I'm now teaching with 2 other trainers in Lancaster. In 2018, that was when I started to offer workshops. So I was certified at the same time as a couple of people, and so 2 of us started offering sort of day-long workshops, and I then kind of moved to do stuff more locally, of sort of shorter 2-hour practice groups, and over lockdown that turned into online groups. So I did some practice groups and coaching groups, and then just in 2020 I became a certified teacher and have kind of been apprenticing to Trudy and Vicky, who have a lot of experience of teaching Hakomi over a lot of years, and both really gifted in different ways, but very experienced teaching Hakomi. And so yeah, I've been learning from them and started this year teaching with them as a teaching group. So I'm going to stop talking again now, or stop talking about the agenda. I'm going to carry on talking, but in inviting you to another experiential practice. So this time, what I wanted to do was to maybe give you some sense of the practice and how we might use experiments. So I firstly wanted to offer you some words in just ordinary consciousness. So there's nothing you need to do to prepare. I'm just going to offer some words and invite you to notice what happens in your experience. And if anyone wants to, they can share how that felt. And then I'm going to guide you into more mindful states and say the same words. And for you to then notice, does anything different happen? Is it exactly the same? And again, there'll be an invitation to, if anyone wants to feedback, they can do that. Or it may just be that you know, it's just something that you do as a personal activity. Again, everything is an invitation. So the words I wanted to just offer you are, you can rest now. You can rest now. And you might notice, what was that like for you? What happened maybe in your thoughts, Did you notice any particular images or maybe any internal voice as a response? Did you notice anything in your body? Did you notice any shift in your emotions? And I don't know if anyone would feel able to share what that was like for them. I'd just give some moments for that. And just take a little bit of a sip of water too.
I'd be happy to share if you're okay with me saying. I immediately, I think it's not something we hear very often, is it? Not something that people tell us very often. And immediately I felt my body just relax that little bit, you know, because I think you keep so much stored, don't you, throughout the day. So I definitely felt that immediate thing. And when you mentioned that sort of, what did your sort of internal voice say? Mine was like, yeah, I'd quite like a rest.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was very immediate for me. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Samantha. And yeah, I think often in ordinary consciousness, there will be some kind of response for sure. So what I want to invite you to do now is to just take a moment to get mindful, and you might have your own way of doing that, or you might want to listen to my sort of guidance. And again, it's an invitation. There's nothing you have to do here. So the invitation is to, again, maybe just pay attention to your senses, perhaps taking a moment to listen to any sounds you can hear. I can hear some pigeons in the distance, just cooing. Perhaps noticing the objects in the room where you are. Maybe some of the colours that are there. Perhaps noticing any scents. Maybe just, again, checking in with the seat where you're sitting or your feet on the ground. Noticing your breath. And maybe turning your attention inwards, either softening your gaze or closing your eyes. Just tuning into the internal flow of your experience. Can you slow down a little bit there? Maybe noticing the quality of thoughts or what's happening in your emotions. Maybe noticing what's happening in your body. Allowing yourself to meet your whole experience. And from that place, I'm going to offer you the same words. And the invitation is to notice what happens as I say, you can rest now. You can rest now. As you take a few moments to just gather your thoughts, maybe you notice nothing changed doing it in that way. Maybe you noticed big differences. I guess the invitation is to notice again, like what happened in your thoughts as you hear those words. What happens in your emotions? What happens in your body? Maybe you noticed a voice inside that was different or the same. Again, the invitation would be to share, if it felt okay, what that was like. I'll just give a moment or two.
Oh, wow, I'll jump in again. Yeah, it's a really relaxing experience. I think just using, just that time to sort of reflect on what's going on in your body, and really sort of connect in that moment. It's very, very relaxing experience. It was a similar reaction, I think, both times, but I took the opportunity to actually close my eyes. That's why I turned my video off.
Yeah, of course.
A bit shy otherwise, I think. But yeah, really, really relaxing, calming experience.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, Samantha. I think what you're describing there is really what we're trying to do in Hakomi, is that kind of noticing that you so articulately have observed in yourself, in your own experience. You were able to tune into a voice, you were able to notice what was happening in your experience. And that's really what we're doing together in a Hakomi session, and a lot in the training. We're kind of working together. What happens when we do it this way, when we make a slight change? Does anything change? Does it stay the same? And the purpose of that is for someone to start to explore their experience more, to get to know themselves more. And often what we're looking for is that very first reaction when we're doing an experiment like that, because it's often that very first instant thing that happens that's often where the juicy bits are, where the meat is, that are sort of habitual reactions. And with a verbal experiment like that, what we're offering to the person is, it's not an affirmation, it's not we're not trying to convince them. We're offering something that has the potential to be nourishing. And what it sounds like for you was that actually it was nourishing, that it started to help you relax, perhaps. Yeah,
that's definitely true for me. And what I love, what you've just said, is that you approach it in different ways. So you experiment, and obviously everyone is going to experience things differently and react to things differently. And I think that's a really interesting element, that you're not trying to impose a practice on someone. You're not trying to get the round peg to fit in the square hole. It's about finding what works and what's nourishing for that individual. So I absolutely love that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So I thought, and I'm conscious of the time, I wanted to leave some time for questions, but I'm just going to share my screen again and go to the sort of last part. So we've done our verbal experiment. So just to say a bit about the training and what's involved. So in terms of reasons to train, people use the Hakomi training in different ways. Initially, for me, I had no intention of becoming a practitioner. It was really about my own interest in self-exploration and self-care. I really found it challenging at times and a nourishing practice a lot of the time. I wanted to know myself better. I wanted to manage my emotions and things that were triggering me better, and generally live a more satisfying life. And that was what I was getting out of it initially. If you're interested in the practitioner training, so becoming a Hakomi practitioner, maybe if I just mention about that briefly. So overall, it's 45 days training. I've mentioned there that there are various training groups. So we have a group in Lancaster. There's also a group in London. We offer, mostly this year, we're offering face-to-face because we've had quite a long time of offering online training, but our intention is to actually move between the two and offer both. And certainly from what I understand, the London group is offering like a blended online and in-person training. And there are various groups around the world actually who offer Hakomi training, some of which is online, some is in person. And what we've moved towards in more recent years is this multi-level approach. So often in the trainings, you'll get people of different levels. And what that does is it just offers such a richness of experience. So you'll have people who have no experience or maybe a few days training, and other people who have a vast wealth of experience and everything in between. It's all experiential, so there's no homework. We do offer reading lists for people who are interested in that, but there's no requirement to do any reading. And really the 45 days training, if you're aiming to become a practitioner, is loosely structured around what used to be level 1, 2, and 3, but we've moved to this multi-level. And I think the level 1, 2, and 3 is useful perhaps to have at the back of your mind as you're moving through the training. The first 15 days is very much focused on personhood and on your own self-knowledge. The second 15 days is more about how you might be a practitioner supporting someone else to self-study. And then the final 15 days is really about deepening your skills as a practitioner. As a multi-level training, I would say it's quite self-directed at your own pace. So there isn't really any kind of requirement to meet those 15 days and then start focusing on practitioner, becoming a practitioner. It really is at your own pace. And the trainings are made up of practices as a whole group, both individually and all together. So we might do something where we're all doing something together, so speaking as a whole group, or we might do something like the guided mindfulness, where someone's kind of talking you through a practice. So we're each kind of working individually in those sorts of instances. There's lots of group work and working in pairs, and lots of opportunities to learn different aspects of the method. So we might do something like along a theme for a weekend's training, and offer different ways of perhaps exploring that or studying that in our own experience and with different people. As well as having practitioner sessions. So we do different ways of either demoing what a Hakomi session might look like, or giving people opportunities to practice as a practitioner. So all of that is kind of part of the weekends of training. And again, it's very much co-created. We often, as trainers, have a loose kind of a plan, but then if something is really coming up in the weekend, if there's something really happening or wanting to happen, then we'll adapt things to meet that. So I've included there some of the dates of the trainings that are coming up. The most imminent one is that 30th and 31st of July, which is the one that I advertised in the group. But we've also got some later in the year, and you're really welcome to contact me if you have questions about it. And I don't know, Sam, if would it be okay to finish with a final practice, or what do you think about?
Yes, absolutely, that would be wonderful. And I know the people that are wanting to watch on the replay would probably really appreciate that as well.
Yeah, Yeah. So one of the things we use, certainly in our training group, and certainly in my own practice, that I use a lot, is things like poetry and pieces of prose. So I thought it would be nice, along that same theme of rest. It feels apt for summer when, certainly for me in the teaching cycle, this is a time of more rest. And in this heat, it sometimes doesn't feel like there's a lot I can do, because it can get so exhausting. And also it tends to be a quieter time for client work, I think, for some people. So yeah, I kind of have some words I'd like to share, and would like to read to you, if that's okay. So the invitation would be to just get really comfy, however you want to be sitting. And these are, it's words from a book called Constellations by David White, and it's words about rest. Rest is the conversation between what we love to do and how we love to be. Rest is the essence of giving and receiving. Rest is an act of remembering imaginatively and intellectually, but also physiologically and physically. To rest is to give up on the already exhausted will as the prime motivator of endeavor, with its endless outward need to reward itself through established goals. To rest is to give up on worrying and fretting and the sense that there is something wrong with the world unless we are there to put it right. To rest is to fall back literally or figuratively from outer targets and shift the goal not to an inner static bullseye, an imagined state of perfect stillness, but to an inner state of natural exchange. The template of natural exchange is the breath, the autonomic giving and receiving, which is the basis and the measure of life itself. We are rested when we are a living exchange between what lies inside and what lies outside, when we are an intriguing conversation between the potential that lies in our imagination and the possibilities for making that internal image real in the world. We are rested when we let things alone and let ourselves alone to do what we do best. Breathe as the body intended us to breathe, to walk as we were meant to walk, to live with the rhythm of a house and a home, giving and taking through cooking and cleaning. When we give and take in this easy foundational way, we are closest to the authentic self, and closest to that self when we are most rested. To rest is not self-indulgent. To rest is to prepare to give the best of ourselves, and perhaps most importantly, arrive at a place where we are able to understand what we have already been given. So just allowing the words to land in whatever way they might land with you. Give yourself a moment to really take that in. And then just finish there. I don't know, Sam, if there's space for questions. I don't know, Karen, if you have anything you want to ask or say, or if there might be questions like in the Facebook group.
Yes, definitely. If anyone's watching replay and they have any questions for Jamie, just pop them in the comments, and then we can make sure that they get answered. Karen, is there anything that you wanted to ask?
I just want to say thank you. It was really, I didn't know anything about Hakomi before, but I was interested in the different selves and how that would work. So yeah, that was really interesting and informative. So thank you.
Ah, you're so
I don't
welcome.
really have any specific questions.
Okay.
And I'll echo those words. It was really needed, I think, today. And as you say, with the hot weather and and just taking that time to have a rest and to reflect on what that meant was a really nice experience. And what I loved about the excerpt that you read was what I took from it is that rest isn't just a not doing thing. We think of rest as in we're just in a state where we're not really there in a way. And I think switching that mindset to rest being us just being rather than not being is a really beautiful way, and sort of preparing. And I think that was a really beautiful description of what rest is. And I will definitely need to go and check that that full quote out, because I'd love to read that again. I suppose the only thing left for me to ask is if someone wants to join the training, or if someone wants to work with you directly, or chat with you further, how is best for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so maybe I could put my website in the comments under the video, and that's got the details of the trainings in the calendar. It's also got my contact details, my email address, and my number if people wanted to contact me that way. The booking for the actual training is being done through Josh Gifford. So when I've advertised, I've given his email address. So perhaps if I put my website and my contact details, but then also Josh's details for the booking, if people wanted to book directly with him.
Brilliant, that's great. And obviously you're in the Facebook group, so if anyone wants to chat with you in the comments or take it to a message on Facebook, obviously they can as well. I just want to say thank you so much again. It's been a really really lovely experience having you coming and chatting with us, and I really hope that everyone who's watching on the replay gets as much out of this as I did. So thank you so much, Jamie. And any questions or any feedback or comments, just pop them in the comments and we can get to those.
Brilliant. Thanks, Samantha, and thanks, Wonderful. Karen.
Lovely. Thank you so much.